Or we'll try to upload it to the website. Yeah, that's from last week. Because I know you guys wanted the quotes from the witchcraft manual, so that's from last week. So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together to celebrate as a church family and to have a meal together. And we just pray, Lord, you'll bless this time, open our hearts, open our minds to your word. That we might that you might guide us, Lord, in our lives and in our walk, that you might draw us closer to you. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Last week, we kind of focused a little bit on Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 18, talking about false prophets and false religious beliefs. Those are two chapters that I am drawn to, in apologetics, defending the faith. So, did you guys have any questions or thoughts from last week? Ideas, footnotes, addendums? No? Everybody's good with false prophets? Know how to find them? But I did want to clarify something. I leaned pretty heavily on feelings last week because a lot of the New Age, a lot of the witchcraft, a lot of these spiritualist things rely heavily on feelings. I'm not saying that feelings are bad. Because sometimes, after a powerful worship service, you might feel closer to God. Sometimes, but as a basis of faith, as a basis of a religion, feelings are not a good thing to base your entire belief system on. Because your feelings are changeable. The heart is deceptive and desperately wicked. So, and the New Age plays a lot on your feelings. And the Bible, when we get to Isaiah, it says, "Come, let us reason together." He doesn't say, "Come, let us feel together." That's one thing I just wanted to clarify. Feelings aren't bad, but as an objective basis of belief, they're kind of dangerous. And Deuteronomy 6:5 says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength." And then Jesus comes along in Matthew 22, Mark 12, and Luke 10, and he says, "And with all your mind." So love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. So your heart is kind of where your emotions are, biblically. Your mind is your intellect, where you have your reason and your logic, and that's how you evaluate things as true or false. And your soul and your body, they're unity, which, we kind of think that we're a soul that has a body, but the way God created us, we're a soul and body unity. So, when you die, your soul's going to go to heaven, but it's not complete until your body catches up, until the resurrection. There's a reason that we have this resurrection in a physical body, because without the body, we're not complete. So the way God designed us. So with everything we are, with your heart, your mind, your soul, your body, we're supposed to love God. So does that make sense? I just wanted to clarify that because it's not that emotions are bad. It's something that distinguishes us from robots. But they're just not an objective standard for religion. So, anybody have any questions or thoughts regarding any of that? False prophets? No? True prophets? Yeah. Are we short notes for this week? Okay. What? I have to remember to print out more. But, so we left off at Deuteronomy 18 last time, and Deuteronomy 19 is about the cities of refuge. Do you guys remember what the cities of refuge were used for? Screwed up how?
Murdered somebody or something like that.
Yeah, if you murdered somebody accidentally. And so why were they important? The Avenger blood? Yeah. Yeah, because you killed somebody, then you need to be put to death. So what you immediately do is you run to one of these cities. Did the city have to let you in? No? What was the condition that they could let you in? Yeah, if you could convince them that it was an accident and not premeditated. Yeah. So, so your life is on the line, and whether or not they let you in is up to them. And how long did you have to stay in the city? Till the high priest died. And after the high priest died, then what? then they can't get you. The law can't touch you. So the high priest was considered your substitute, and when he died, you're now guiltless. So in Deuteronomy 19, Moses is going to go over that again, and he also says don't move your neighbor's landmark. So they would have these stones. In Texas, they have pins where you do your surveys, and God's saying don't move those. Just don't get up in the middle of the night and move your fence line on your neighbor. Don't do that. So and God is telling you specifically not to do this. But I want to jump in at verse 15 on chapter 19. So if you're able and can stand for the reading of God's word, we'll jump into that. It's about witnesses. So verse 15, one witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. If a false witness arises against a man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days, and the judges shall make a careful inquiry, and indeed, if the witness is a false witness, who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away the evil from among you, and those who remain shall hear and fear. And hereafter they shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eyes shall not pity, the life shall be for life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Thank you. You may be seated. So, when you go before the judge, you need to have 2 witnesses. And in the New Testament, we're familiar with that. But in Matthew 26, Jesus is arrested. He faces trial at night, which was against the law of Moses. They offered a bribe to Judas, which is also illegal, against the law of Moses. It was a day before a Sabbath. Passover was the next day. That was against the law. You can't try somebody the day before a Sabbath. They should have waited until after the morning sacrifice before judging him. So that was also against the law. They brought false witnesses against him, which is against the law. The high priest tore his clothes, which we saw in Leviticus. That's against the law. And the high priest says, we don't need any witnesses. That's against the law. Then they sentenced him that night instead of waiting a day. You're supposed to wait a day before pronouncing sentence. So that was also against the law. Then they spat and beat Jesus, and that was against the law. You can put them to death, but you're not supposed to mistreat prisoners. So pretty much every detail concerning the trial of Jesus, and there were 6 trials, 3 Jewish, 3 Roman, and they violated Roman laws, they violated Mosaic laws, everything just to get him. So that's kind of why I wanted to specifically read this. Any thoughts regarding the trial of Jesus? Because they violated Roman laws too.
Not enough, but the Mormon Church especially uses this to kind of push away and hide molestation, especially.
Mm-hmm.
In cases of sexual immorality and that kind of thing, where it is a very personal, one-on-one kind of sin.
Yeah.
Do you know if this 2 witness?
Oh, we'll get to that.
I mean,
That's in the next few chapters about rape and sexual immorality. They're going to deal specifically with that. But the Mormons, they do make an interesting claim that their Book of Mormon, at the very beginning of it, they have 11 witnesses, and they testify to the truth of the Book of Mormon. It's like, okay. Do you have any archaeological evidence? Any prophetic evidence? Do you have any evidence other than the testimony of these 11 men that what this book says is true? There's 0 archaeology that supports the Book of Mormon. And if you take away everybody that was related to Joseph Smith, you get like 3 of them. Or 3 of his family members are part of those 11 witnesses, and the rest of them just denied their testimony later on. So it's like, how does that prove anything? You can get 11 guys together to lie about something.
That's one thing. They go back to this text a lot.
Yeah.
They use that. So
Yeah. But then again, I mean,
high crimes.
One of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, he says Joseph Smith was only given the gift of translating the Reformed Egyptian, which is not a language, and he is not a prophet. So one of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon specifically says he's not a prophet. What do you do with that? So the Book of Mormon has all kinds of problems. So does Joseph Smith. So, yeah, yeah. And even if he said something that comes true and he's following a different God, we're not supposed to believe it. Because the Mormons are polytheists. They believe in many different gods. And if you're a faithful Mormon man, you get to become a god too and have a harem of women by which you can repopulate your own planet. So does that sound like a man-made religion? You know, all the power you want, all the sex you want? Yeah. Same thing with Islam. So, Deuteronomy 20, we get to rules regarding warfare. And, they're getting ready to go into the land. They're going to be doing a lot of fighting. And one of the rules is if you build a new house and you haven't had a chance to dedicate it, go home. You're exempt from the draft. If you planted a vineyard and you haven't eaten of it, then go home until you have eaten of your vineyard. And that could take up to 4 years, by the time you plant it and harvest and finally are able to eat of it. If you're engaged to a woman and you haven't married her, go home. And the engagement period was usually a year. And then after you're married, you're exempt from service for a year. So you could have up to a 2-year exemption. And if you're afraid, go home. Why do you think he said if you're scared, go home? Yeah, I mean, yeah, you get one guy that's panicking and freaking out, it kind of spreads.
Well, you're not going to take care of your brother.
Yeah, you're too busy running. But one of the things that he's very clear about is when you go against a city that is outside of the promised land, then you can give them a chance to surrender and let them serve you. So they would send you tribute and stuff like that. But if you're inside the land, kill everybody. And that seems pretty harsh. Why do you think God would say that? It's one of the things critics like to come against the Bible with. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. They're going into the land of Canaan. And remember, Noah said, cursed be Canaan. He didn't curse Ham directly. He cursed his grandson, Canaan. And since then, these people have been in this land for probably 800 years at least. And they were extremely wicked, extremely sexually perverse. And God sends Israel in there as a judgment against them. Israel is supposed to go in like the flood and destroy everything that has breath. And they didn't, which will bring us to the book of Judges. And you'll see what happens. But this is God's judgment against the people of Canaan. And rampant throughout this land is a lot of sexual diseases. And that's why God specifically told them in Leviticus, rules regarding sexual contact. Don't mess around with this stuff. Because in Canaan, you're going to get a disease and it can spread like wildfire through the camp. So God is very, very careful in what he tells these people. And, that's what was going on inside the land. And these people, like I mentioned last week, they'd sacrifice their own children. It's just part of the way you did, if you want to have a good harvest, you sacrifice your child. If you want to build a nice house, then you sacrifice your child. Bury it in the foundations. So, that's what they would do. And they also worship Moloch, who is a bronze idol that had metal arms, and they would heat it up and then place their children on it. And while the baby was screaming, they'd play music. So these are the kinds of people God is saying, go in there and destroy them. This is God's judgment against these people. So this is not something that we need to make excuses for, because when you know what these people were capable of, then yeah, God says go in there and destroy them. And, just like he destroyed the world once with a flood, these Hebrews are supposed to go in the land like a flood and destroy everything inside the land. So, Deuteronomy 21 deals with unsolved murders and female captives. When you go to war, one of the rules was you're not just going in there just to rape and pillage. That was against the law. But if you see a pretty girl, you could take her as your wife. This is not a sex slave. This is entirely different than what Muhammad did. So you could, if you see a woman, you could take her as a wife, but you couldn't just use her as a sex slave. And so you can compare that with Islam and the spread of Islam. And, there's a reason that all these Western countries are having problems with rape by letting all these migrants come in. Because the migrants don't care. So this is entirely different mode of warfare than what the rest of the world practices. And this female captive, you take her as wife, and if something happens and you have to get a divorce, you're not to treat her badly. You're not to sell her as a slave. You can't treat this woman badly. God is putting real strict rules on how you can treat these females. So, any thoughts?
It's just interesting to me. I mean, obviously they were supposed to wipe out everyone in Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they weren't supposed to have wives from in there, but yet it was okay for them to take women from outside of their own people.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's rules in Leviticus. The woman had to be a virgin. All the males are to be killed regardless. But a woman, a girl that has not known a man, then they're allowed. But every other woman, there's a lot of disease going on, so it's just one of those things.
So the virgins were allowed to live, but the other ones weren't.
Yeah, but they're supposed to go in and kill everybody. But if you find a specific woman that you want to take as a wife, yeah. Which brings up an interesting question. What about Rahab? We'll get to that in Joshua.
No restrictions, no.
No, not really. It's might makes right, or might makes, I guess. It doesn't make it right. It just, yeah, I mean, the option is to die or to become a wife.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
Live or marry this man. I think I would die.
And you get his inheritance after he dies. So, I mean, you become a legitimate. So yeah, the feminist movement, it falls apart when men are willing to beat you and kill you. It's good for developed countries, but when you're going into this kind of a land and life and death is at the edge of a sword, it's kind of brutal.
Does that make her pay to stay married? Does that make her
Yeah. Yeah, she comes in, and we'll get into some of this too. God is going to deal with that too. There's basically a waiting period before she's accepted into the assembly, and it'll be kind of fascinating when we get there. But yeah, they're not just basically immediately a Jew or Hebrew at this time. Any other thoughts?
Are there any problems with going in there and say, yeah, I'm a virgin, but marry them, and then
Yeah, we'll deal with that too. That's covered in there too. Yeah, God covers all the bases here, so. But Deuteronomy 21, let's jump down to verse 18. This one is also another sticking point for a lot of Christians. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have chastened him, will not heed them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the city, to the gate of the city. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious, and he will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones, and ye shall put away the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. So is God saying kill your kids that are rebellious? Well, what's he saying then?
Punish them harshly.
Huh?
Punish them harshly.
Well, no, it's stone him to death.
I mean, yeah, it's killing because he's stoned to death.
Yeah, yeah. This isn't talking about a teenager or something. This is a guy who is fully grown. He's rebellious. He's a drunkard, and he's stubborn, and he will not listen to his parents. This is criminal activity. This is not just a rebellious 6-year-old.
I think it's to the point he's been given all the chances.
Yeah, he's an adult, and and he's showing that he cannot be restrained. So take him to the elders; they will judge him, and he's put to death. But what's interesting about this section, this is the law for Israel under Moses, but this gives us a background to one of the most famous parables that Jesus ever gave, the prodigal son. And in Luke 15, he gives a trilogy of parables, and each one shows us something different about God. But you all know the parable. The younger son comes to the dad, and what does he say? He wants his inheritance. What he's actually saying is, I wish you were dead. Give me my inheritance. Because that's the only way you can get your inheritance is if your dad dies. And so according to Deuteronomy 21, what should the father have done?
So take him before the...
Yeah. And instead, what does the dad do? Dad gives him his inheritance. The kid goes off and wakes up one day in a pig pen, says, man, the slaves of my dad have it better than I do. And he comes back. And what happens when he tries to return? Does dad say, okay, you can work as one of my slaves? Yeah, he throws him a feast. So do you understand how scandalous that parable would have been in light of Moses? This is not what Moses taught us. How dare you? And, there's a lot of interesting stuff about the parable of the prodigal son, but this gives you a background and a depth that you understand why the religious leaders had a problem with Jesus. This is insurrection. This is not what Moses taught us. So, any other thoughts? No? Okay. And then verse 22, if a man has committed a sin deserving of death and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving to you as an inheritance. For he who is hanged on a tree is accursed of God. This is one of the weird little footnotes that is buried in the law of Moses and the hanging on a tree. If a man commits a sin deserving of death, then you stone him to death, and then you can hang him on a tree. The hanging was not the method of death. It was just to show that this person is cursed of God. So, usually in the law, you have a sin, the result is death, you put him to death. But this adds an extra little thing that after the guy is dead and he's hung on a tree, then it's shown to be as accursed of God. So, why do you think that's going to be important? Because of Jesus. So, when Jesus went to the cross, what sin did he commit? None. So how could God curse him? Because of this little footnote. If he's hung on a tree, he can become accursed. He didn't commit any sins deserving of death. So this little footnote is the basis of Galatians 3. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. So Jesus didn't commit a sin, but he was hung on a tree. And this little footnote is the basis by which God judged him. So it's one of the fascinating little footnotes that you can find in Deuteronomy. So the law couldn't touch him, but because of this, God judged him. So any thoughts? Just understand that the hanging wasn't the method of death in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 22 has some interesting little moral laws. If you find your neighbor's animal wandering around, then you take it to your house and protect it, keep it until your neighbor can come for it. There is no such thing as finders keepers in the law of Moses. So, you have to treat others like you want to be treated. And when you build a house, they had flat roofs. So on your roof, you had to have a parapet, usually about 36 inches tall. In New Mexico, they build these kind of things a lot, and it was to prevent somebody from accidentally walking off your roof and hurting themselves. So God's given them all these little rules about how to live in the land. And when you plant your vineyard, it needs to be a vineyard. You can't plant multiple seeds there. And this section also deals with infidelity, rape, and basically this section goes to what you were asking about, was if a man takes his wife and basically accuses her of not being a virgin, then she'll be stoned. Now, the parents, if they could provide evidence that she was a virgin, whether it was her wedding gown or the sheets from the wedding night, because they would take those sheets and give them to the parents as like a receipt. And if they could produce the receipts, then the guy would be punished. But if they could produce no receipts, then the woman was stoned. And it was false pretenses. If a man sleeps with a married woman, then both of them will die. This provides the background to the woman caught in adultery in Jesus when they brought her to Jesus. Because the question is where was the man? If a young woman is engaged and she is raped inside a city, then both of them will die, the rapist and the woman. Why do you think that? Does that sound fair?
No.
Why not?
She was raped.
Inside the city. Inside the city, the thing, the idea is that she's going to scream. And every man is going to come to her and help her. So if there was no scream, there wasn't rape. If she's in the country and there's nobody around, then that man is put to death. So, if there's nobody to hear her screaming, then the man is put to death. So, I think we'd have a lot less sexual problems if rapists were put to death. So, it's hard to rape a second time after you're dead. But, and if a man lays with a woman and she is not engaged, then he has to marry her. Sounds like it'd fix a lot of our problems today, right? So,
Brother Jared, I have to say
Yeah.
something funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it is sad. I grew up with this family. This family lived across the street from us, and she eloped. They were Hispanic, and he brought her back, and the dad said, "Oh no." Yeah, he actually brought her back, and he's like, "No, you're gonna marry her."
yep.
Yeah.
It was called shotgun wedding back in the day.
Like, I can't believe he had the nerve to bring her back. He was from the military, and I'm like,
Yeah. There's no take backsies. No take backs.
Some military men are smart. Not. There are plenty of youngsters that woo, I had a good time. We should get married. I don't know you from a hole in the wall, but I'm
All right. Any other thoughts regarding this kind of stuff?
I understand that too, but I also think of, men overpower women.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also I'm going to cover your mouth so you can't scream. So I still think of some of that, there's still a lot of opportunity
Yeah.
for,
Like, once he's left, he's screaming.
Yeah. There'll be signs of struggle. If her lip's bleeding, there's a lot of evidence there. And, the idea being if you as a man understand that you can be put to death for doing this, that's a discouragement too. They didn't play. You can't pay a fine. You're going to be put to death. So remember, Israel didn't have jails. Yeah, you either pay restitution or you're going to die. And if it was serious enough and God considers rape serious, then the result is you die. I don't know. Yeah. Well, when we get to the book of Judges, it's like they didn't follow the law at all anyway, so this is human nature. This is God's prescription. It's not descriptive of what they did.
personally, I was
But in this culture, under the law of Moses, you can go to the priest, and he is supposed to hear you fairly and justly, and they're not supposed to show favoritism at all, which was another thing they did in Jesus' trial. That, yeah. But you know, the idea that you'd be put to death is a very strong deterrent.
Knowing that hanging over your head, I think
Exactly.
you'd literally be fighting for your life.
Yeah.
Not just a,
Yeah, your kid comes home and he's all excited, and, you know, his shirt's ripped, and it's like, where were you? And now we go back to that other section, the rebellious son. I think he did something bad. Let's go find out. So this was a community kind of a thing, responsibility. Now in Deuteronomy 23, we get back to the question regarding marrying these foreign women. He who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. That was kind of a detail. But one of illegitimate birth, verse 2, shall not enter the assembly of the Lord even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord. An Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pithor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall not seek their peace nor their prosperity all your days forever. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you were an alien in his land. The children of the 3rd generation born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. So here's the waiting period. Egyptians, Edomites, they can enter the assembly after 3 generations, but an Ammonite and a Moabite are excluded for 10 generations. So why do you think this might be kind of problematic? We have a guy named Salmon. He's going to marry a woman named Rahab in Jericho. So according to this, his line is going to be illegitimate. And Rahab's going to have a son by the name of Boaz, and he's going to marry Ruth, a Moabitess. That means his line is illegitimate, right? So we're going to look at that when we get to the book of Ruth, because it's kind of fascinating how these men were legally able to marry these women. Because who comes from Ruth? Not Jesus, but David, the king of Israel. So we'll deal with that when we get to Ruth, because it's really kind of fascinating how God lines it up. And it's one of those things that shows you that God is not bound by time, because he set this up all the way back with Judah and Tamar. So we'll look at that in more detail later. So that'll be teasers. Deuteronomy 24 concerns a lot regarding miscellaneous laws, divorce, and we get to, let's see, where am I at? 24, let's see, 19. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. So this is another background for the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth ties a lot of this stuff together. This is the welfare system. So if you find you're poor and you need something to eat, you can go out to the fields and pick up whatever they dropped. And in Leviticus, they specifically says, don't harvest the corners of your field. That's for the poor people. So a poor person can go out, harvest this stuff, and eat. That's the welfare system. They didn't just hand you a card and say, get whatever you want. So they expected you to go out and work for it. So this is a little detail for the background of Ruth. And in Deuteronomy 25, we get to a really weird kind of section. Verse 5, Deuteronomy 25:5. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if a man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him who has his sandal removed. So this is kind of a weird little section, but this is called the Levirate marriage. And it's something that also applies to Judah and Tamar. And remember, we talked about the Goel. He has 3 functions. And Derek mentioned one of them is the avenger of blood. What was another function of the Goel? You guys remember? Well, he had the right to buy back land. Like if you sell yourself into slavery, the Goel can come and buy it back for you and get you out of slavery. This is the 3rd thing that was required of the Goel, to make sure that a man's line did not disappear. Specifically, in this case, it's a brother. It's assuming that this other brother is not married, because that would disqualify him, and then you'd have to move off to the cousins. But while this seems super weird to us, remember they're going into the land, and the land's going to be divided by tribe and divided into families. And this is all about the land and how it's going to be organized. If this line disappears, what happens to that land? So the child that's born is not going to be from the surviving brother, it's going to be to the dead brother. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, yeah, the second child would be for the other guy. And so there are no exceptions to this. If he just refuses, then the woman takes him to the elders and spits in his face, takes a shoe, and everybody makes fun of him. So that also gets us back to the book of Ruth. They're going to perform this thing with Boaz. So any thoughts? I know it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's something that, ancient Israel, it was part of their heritage. So Deuteronomy 26 talks about tithes and offerings. We've covered a lot of that in Leviticus. In Deuteronomy 27, Moses is going to tell the people that when they cross over to the Jordan, they're to assemble at Shechem. You guys remember Shechem? Where the 2 gangsters basically went in and killed all the men. So they're coming back into Shechem. And when they come in, you got Shechem here, you got Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and they're going to split the tribes. Half of them are going to be on this mountain, half of them are going to be on that mountain. And what they're going to do is, on Mount Gerizim, they're going to pronounce blessings. On Mount Ebal, they're going to pronounce cursings. And what we're in Deuteronomy 28, we get a little taste of that. 28 verse 3. So on the blessing side, Mount Gerizim, blessed you shall be in your city, blessed you shall be in the country, blessed you shall be the fruit of your body, the produce of your ground, and the increase of your herds, the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks. Blessed shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Blessed you shall be when you come in, blessed you shall be when you go out. The Lord will cause your enemies who rise against you to be defeated before your face. They shall come out against you in 1 way and flee before you 7 ways. So the people on Mount Gerizim are going to pronounce blessing, 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 blessing. If you follow God and obey his commandments, you'll be blessed. If you don't, then you'll be cursed. You'll be cursed in your fields, cursed in your houses, cursed in your kneading bowls, cursed, 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 cursed. So there's this back and forth, and it's just kind of funny that Shechem is right there in the middle where we got all this history. But what's interesting is in the 1980s, they found what they think is Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal. And you can visit it today, but you'll need an escort by the IDF because it's kind of a hotbed. you know. So if you don't go in there with the IDF, you'll probably be killed. In 2022, they found a tablet on Mount Ebal. It's called the Curse Tablet, and they had to kind of x-ray it to find out what it supposedly says. But it says, supposedly, you are cursed by the God Yahweh, cursed, you shall die, cursed, cursed, you shall surely die, cursed you are by Yahweh, cursed. And there's a lot of debate regarding this little tablet because it's only about that big, and it could be a weight from a fishing net, but they're still debating this today, you know, because they only found it a few years ago. But we're pretty sure that this is Joshua's altar that they're looking at, and that's from where they would pronounce the cursings. Any thoughts or questions regarding the blessings and cursings? Because this will be a recurring theme throughout the Bible. But Moses is now on his final stretch before dying. They're going to renew the covenant in Moab. And in chapter 30, we get Moses' final words. Chapter 30, verse 11, Moses is speaking, "For this commandment, which I command you today, is not too mysterious for you, nor is it far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, 'Who will ascend into heaven for us to bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it?' Nor is it beyond the sea that you shall say, 'Who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it?' But the word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. And I command you today to love the Lord your God, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, his statutes, his judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away so that you do not hear, and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you will surely perish. You shall not prolong your days on the land which you cross over the Jordan to go in and possess. I call heaven and earth as witness today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob, to give them." So Moses is saying, look, I'm setting before you life and good, death and evil. Choose good. It's the same decision Adam and Eve had. You know, you can have everything is good except don't eat of this tree. So what do you think the people are going to choose? That's how we do. Deuteronomy 31, Moses appoints Joshua as his successor, and he commands the people that this book needs to be read every 7 years at the Feast of Tabernacles. The Levites are also to take a copy of this book and set it beside the Ark of the Covenant inside the tabernacle. And the people are going to kind of forget about it until one day Josiah is cleaning the temple and they happen to find this book. They're like, whoopsies, we should have been reading this. This is good stuff. Deuteronomy 32, Moses is going to prophesy over the people, over the tribes, just like Jacob did before he died. And we might look at some of this later on as we go through the Old Testament. But Deuteronomy 34 was probably recorded by Joshua, who took over from Moses. And so they go up to the Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, where Balaam had tried to curse the people. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali from the land in the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea to the south, the plain valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite of Beth Peor, and no one knows where his grave is to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses ended. And Joshua the son of Nun, full of spirit and wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. So Moses, when he dies, he's not old and decrepit. So I imagine Joshua probably had a hard time keeping up with him going up this mountain because, he was a stairmaster. He was going back and forth over Sinai and all over these mountains. I imagine trying to keep up with Moses would have been a trick. But Moses is dying, and Joshua is now going to take over. But God shows him the land and refuses to allow him to enter. Does he get to enter? At the Mount of Transfiguration, who's standing there with Jesus? Yeah, so Moses gets to enter the land. It's just on the other side of death, but he gets to stand in there. And of course, what does Peter say? Hey, we should build some tents, hang out. I don't think so. So any thoughts, questions regarding the Pentateuch? You guys ready for the test next week? You guys liked the test last time, so I figured, hey, let's do something, and it might be fun. And so it'll be essay, don't worry. Let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the words of Moses to encourage us, Lord, to seek life and good. And help us, Lord, turn our hearts away from evil, that we might seek your face in everything that we do. We ask your blessing on the service today and on the fellowship. And we just give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. So you guys don't want the test? You seemed to like it last time.